Welcome to the deep dive. Looks like we're diving deep into knowledge itself today. We've got academic papers, research summaries, even some interesting comparisons of different ways of knowing things.
Absolutely. It seems our listeners going beyond just, wanting to learn more stuff.
Right, it's more than just trivia night.
Exactly. They're interested in how we categorize knowledge, how it might be different across cultures.
Oh, and even the ethics of using what we know,
Hmm.
which is a pretty deep rabbit hole.
It really is. It's getting to the core of how we understand the world, I think.
Okay, so to start, the document jumps right into definitions.
Yeah, like what even is knowledge?
Right, not just information, but actual knowledge.
And this is where we get into things like justified true belief, a classic philosophical concept.
So it has to be true. You have to believe it.
And there needs to be a good reason for that belief. But what's cool is this document actually challenges that a bit.
Yeah, it brings up how different cultures might have totally different ways of justifying their beliefs.
Exactly. What counts as proof in one place might not fly somewhere else.
So then, are there multiple right ways of knowing?
That's a big question. And the document uses traditional medicine as an example.
Oh, right, like where generations of experience are the proof that something works.
But from a Western scientific perspective, it might not meet those strict, justified, true belief rules.
So could knowledge exist outside of these traditional frameworks? It makes you think.
Definitely. And the document also points out that knowledge isn't just one thing, it's categorized in different ways.
Like explicit versus tacit knowledge, right?
Exactly. Explicit is stuff you can easily put into words, like facts, formulas.
But tacit knowledge is more about experience and intuition.
The document uses the example of a chef knowing when a dish is perfectly seasoned.
Years of experience, you can't just read that in a book.
Exactly. And this is important because it affects how we learn, how we share what we know. Think about it, like in your own life.
What are some examples of tacit knowledge you VE picked up? Maybe at work or...
Yeah, a hobby, even just navigating your social group. There's so much we know that's hard to put into words.
And speaking of learning, the document then gets into different learning theories: behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism.
Right, there are different ways of looking at how we learn. Behaviorism focuses on what we can observe, rewards, and punishments.
Cognitivism is more about what's happening inside the brain.
Memory, problem solving, all those mental processes. And then there's constructivism, which is more about the learner actively building their understanding.
Through experiences and interactions, not just being told stuff.
Exactly. So it's like different recipes for knowledge in a way.
And the document even links this to real-world education.
Like drilling multiplication tables, that's behaviorism.
But then you have more hands-on, exploratory learning environments, which is more constructivist.
The point is, there's no one right way to learn. It's often a mix of these theories that works best.
Okay, so we've defined knowledge, looked at types of knowledge, different ways of learning.
And now we get to the really interesting part. How do we actually USC what we know in real life?
The document dives into applying knowledge, and it brings up models for things like problem solving, decision making.
Even creativity. There are a lot of ways we use what we know.
One model that caught my eye was the DIKW model.
Ah, yes, the classic data information knowledge wisdom framework.
It basically shows how we go from raw data.
All the way to wisdom. It's a journey.
And it shows that knowledge isn't just about having a bunch of facts. It's about making those facts meaningful.
Connecting them to other things we know and using all of that to make good decisions.
And speaking of decisions, the document gets into how our knowledge, or lack of it, can really affect the choices we make.
It talks about decision-making models, but also things like cognitive biases.
That part was fascinating. It turns out we aren't always as logical as we think.
Right. We rely on mental shortcuts, unconscious biases, things that can trip us up even when we have a lot of knowledge.
So just having knowledge isn't enough. We have to be aware of these biases, these pitfalls in our thinking.
Exactly. Recognizing them is the first step to overcoming them. It's like a meta level of knowledge about our own thinking.
Okay, ready for a bit of a shift. This next part feels especially relevant these days.
I think so too. This is where the document gets into knowledge and power.
Ooh, yeah, how knowledge can be used for good or for bad. To influence people, control, even manipulate.
It talks about propaganda, misinformation. how knowledge can be twisted, especially in this age of information overload.
And this raises some big questions for our listener, right? Like, how do you evaluate the information you see every day?
How do you know what's true in a world full of competing narratives?
The document really emphasizes critical thinking, media literacy.
It's not enough to just passively absorb information. We have to question it, look at the source, the biases.
Think about the impact it might have. It's like being an active participant in the flow of information, not just letting it wash over you.
It's a call to be responsible with knowledge, both how we consume it and how we share it with others.
It reminds me of the part about technology. The internet gives us access to so much, but it also creates new challenges.
It's a double-edged sword. More information than ever, but that means we need to be even more discerning.
Like, think about how much stuff you see on social media every day. How do you sort through all of that?
Developing those critical thinking skills is absolutely vital in this environment. It's not just about what you know, it's about how you know it.
So true. Okay, next section is about the ethics of applying knowledge, which I think is something our listener will really connect with.
Absolutely. This goes beyond what knowledge I say is to how it should be used.
The document looks at different ethical frameworks and shows how the same knowledge can be used in different ways.
Depending on the intent, the context, it can be beneficial or it can be harmful. It's a powerful realization.
And there's some great examples in the document, like artificial intelligence. It has so much potential, but
There are also risks, right? Bias in algorithms, potential for job displacement, even misuse for harmful purposes.
it's a stark reminder that knowledge itself is neutral. It's our choices that determine the impact.
Those ethical frameworks can help us navigate these tough decisions, but ultimately the responsibility lies with us.
Both as individuals and as a society, to use knowledge wisely. It's like that old saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We can't just focus on acquiring knowledge without thinking about the consequences.
Precisely. And that leads us to the final section, which is all about the future of knowledge. Where are we headed?
This part feels almost futuristic. The document talks about things like big data, machine learning.
And how everything is becoming more interconnected, global networks of knowledge, it's really mind-blowing.
It talks about unlocking new discoveries, solving global problems, even changing how we understand ourselves and the universe.
It's exciting, but also a bit daunting, right? So many possibilities and so many unknowns.
Definitely. But that's kind of the beauty of it, isn't it? Knowledge is constantly evolving. What we know today might be different tomorrow.
And the future of knowledge is being shaped right now. By engaging with these new trends, we can all play a role in guiding that direction.
Wow, we've covered so much already. From defining knowledge to how it's applied, the ethics, the future.
It's amazing how much depth there is to something we often take for granted.
I agree. But before we move on, I want to leave our listener with something to think about. We've talked about how knowledge is categorized, learned, applied. But what about your own personal knowledge, listener?
How have your experiences shaped what you know and how you see the world? Keep that question in mind as we continue our deep dive.
So we were just talking about how our own experiences kind of shape how we see the world. And the document goes on to talk about epistemic tools. Sounds complicated, but I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it might sound intimidating, but it's pretty simple, really. Epistemic tools are basically anything that helps us, gain knowledge, process information.
Oh, okay, so like,
Even something as basic as language is an epistemic tool. It lets us communicate ideas, share experiences, build knowledge together.
wow, never thought about it like that.
Right. And of course, now we have all these new epistemic tools in the digital age.
Like search engines, databases, social media. They're changing how we learn and share information all the time.
And each tool has its own strengths and weaknesses. Like search engines are amazing. You can find almost anything.
You have to be careful about what sources you're using.
Right.
Not everything you find online is accurate or reliable.
Exactly. And then you have online databases, which are great for structured, organized information. But
It might not always capture the nuances of real-world situations. It's not always black and white.
right. And then there's social media. It's amazing for connecting with people, sharing ideas. But it can also create these echo chambers.
Where you only see information that confirms your existing beliefs.
Exactly. And it can spread misinformation like wildfire. It's a tricky landscape to navigate.
It's like we have this amazing toolbox, but we need to learn how to use each tool properly and, responsibly.
That's such a good point. It's not just about the tools themselves. It's about how we as individuals, A and D as a society, choose to use them. This deep dive is really making us think about our relationship with knowledge, especially with everything changing so fast.
It's like learning the rules of a whole new world.
Oh,
Okay, moving on. The document then gets into this really fascinating discussion about all the different types of knowledge that exist. It breaks it down into different domains like science, humanities,
yeah.
arts, even indigenous knowledge systems.
It highlights how, different cultures and different fields of study have developed their own unique ways of understanding the world. It's incredible.
Like science, with its focus on observation and experimentation, has given us so much insight into like the natural world, how things work.
Right. And then you have the humanities, which delve into the human experience through things like history, philosophy, literature.
Trying to understand what it means to be human, the big questions.
Yeah. Exactly. And then there are the arts, which offer another way of knowing and expressing ourselves. Often they communicate things that words just can't.
That's like a different kind of language, right?
Yeah.
One that speaks to our emotions or intuition.
Exactly. And the document also emphasizes the importance of valuing indigenous knowledge systems. These are ways of knowing that have been passed down through generations, often holding a deep understanding of local environments, ecosystems, cultural traditions, things that might not be captured in more mainstream forms of knowledge.
It's like a reminder that there are so many different ways of seeing and understanding the world, and they're all valuable.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that these different domains of knowledge aren't like separate silos. They can really inform and enrich each other.
Oh, that's a good point. Like, scientific discoveries can inspire artistic expressions, or historical events can shape philosophical thought.
Exactly. It's like this beautiful tapestry woven together from all these different threads of knowledge. And the document actually emphasizes the importance of what's called interdisciplinarity, where different fields of study come together.
To solve problems, gain new insights.
Because no single perspective has all the answers. By bringing together different ways of knowing, we can tackle challenges in ways that wouldn't be possible if we just stayed in our own little lane.
So we've talked about defining knowledge, different types of knowledge, how it's applied, the tools we use to access it.
And now we get to something I think our listener will find especially fascinating, the concept of personal knowledge.
Ooh, yes. This is where it gets really, well, personal.
The document delves into how our own identities, our values, our experiences, all of that shapes what we know and how we see the world. It's not just about objective facts, it's also about our own subjective interpretations.
This part really resonated with me because it acknowledges that knowledge isn't just some thing out there. It's intertwined with who we are. Our beliefs, our biases, they all play a role in how we understand things.
Right. The document highlights how two people can witness the same event, but have completely different interpretations based on their own personal knowledge and biases. It's a reminder that our own truth is often just one perspective among many.
It's so true. I remember this one time, well, let's just say a misunderstanding with a friend really showed me how different backgrounds and experiences can lead to totally different interpretations of the same situation.
It's amazing how those personal experiences can be such powerful teachers. They show us that there's always more than one way to see things.
Exactly. It's a call to be more self-aware, to acknowledge our own biases, and to be open to other viewpoints, to realize that we might not have the whole picture.
This deep dive is encouraging us to not only explore all this knowledge out there in the world, but also to look inward and examine our own, internal lens. Think about it, listener. What are some core beliefs that you hold that shape your understanding of things? Have you ever questioned why you believe what you believe? This section is all about becoming more reflective about our own knowledge.
It's about becoming more conscious and intentional about how we know what we know.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of these, theoretical concepts about knowledge. But the document doesn't just stop there. It actually gives some really practical advice for how to actually learn things better, how to acquire knowledge, retain it, use it effectively.
This is where it gets really down to earth. It's packed with strategies for learning, studying, improving your memory, tools to help you become a more efficient and effective learner.
I was really intrigued by the concept of active recall. The document explains that instead of just passively rereading information, it's much better to try to actively recall it from memory, like quizzing yourself. It's like a workout for your brain. Active recall helps strengthen those neural pathways associated with the information you're trying to learn. It forces you to engage with the material more deeply, which leads to better retention in the long run.
And there were so many other helpful tips, like spaced repetition. where you revisit information at increasing intervals to really cement it in your long-term memory.
Spaced repetition is like a secret weapon against forgetting. By spacing out your review sessions, you're basically telling your brain, hey, this is important, don't let go of it.
And it even emphasizes things like getting enough sleep and taking breaks. Who knew?
It might seem counterintuitive, but giving your brain time to rest and process information is crucial for effective learning. Cramming might work in the short term, but it's not a sustainable strategy for deep, lasting understanding.
It's about working smarter, not harder. I like that.
Our brains are amazing, but they need time to do their thing. Sleep and breaks allow for consolidation of information, making those connections stronger.
This whole section felt like a masterclass on how to be a better learner.
It's full of practical advice that anyone can use, no matter what they're trying to learn.
Okay, we're almost at the end of this amazing deep dive, but there's one last section that I think will really leave our listener with some food for thought. It's where the document gets a bit philosophical, exploring the nature of truth and the limits of human knowledge.
Yeah, this is where we bump up against the big mysteries. The document reminds us that knowledge is always going to be incomplete. There are limits to what we can understand about the universe, about ourselves.
It's a bit humbling, right?
Definitely. It makes you realize that even with all the amazing advancements we've made, there's still so much we don't know. And maybe some things we'll never know.
It really challenges us to think about some fundamental questions like, what is truth? How do we know what we know? Are there things that are just beyond our grasp?
It's a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is a lifelong journey. There will always be more to learn, more to explore, more questions to ask. And that's okay.
It's exciting and a little scary at the same time. It makes you realize how much is still out there.
And that brings us to a really important concept that the document emphasizes: intellectual humility. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, that our understanding is constantly evolving, and that being open to new information, different perspectives, that's essential for growth.
It's about being willing to let go of old ideas when new evidence comes along, and realizing that what we know today might change tomorrow.
Exactly. It's about being comfortable with uncertainty and seeing it as an opportunity for learning rather than something to be afraid of.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. We've gone from defining knowledge to exploring its different types, how it's applied, the tools we use, the limitations. It's amazing how much this one concept touches every part of our lives.
It really is. It's been such a comprehensive exploration. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a final thought. We've seen how interconnected knowledge really is, how it's constantly being created, shared, reshaped through this interplay of individual and collective efforts. It's not something static. It's this living, breathing network. And we're all a part of it.
We're all contributing to it and being shaped by it at the same time. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
So as you continue reflecting on all this, listener, consider this. How does your understanding of knowledge fit into this interconnected web? How do you contribute to it? And how is it, in turn, shaping you?
There's some powerful questions to ponder.
It really makes you realize that knowledge isn't just something we passively receive. It's something we actively participate in, something we help create.
It's dynamic, it's evolving, and by understanding our role in it, we can be more intentional about how we engage with it and help it grow.
That question really stuck with me, about how we each fit into this, giant web of knowledge. It makes you think about all the ways we're connected.
It's amazing, right? How knowledge is always being built, shared, changed through all these interactions, big and small. It's not just this thing out there. It's something we're all actively shaping.
And the document gives some really cool examples of this. It talks about how scientific knowledge isn't just, one genius having a eureka moment. It's built through collaboration, sharing data, peer review.
Right. It's a whole community effort. Scientists from all over the world working together, building on each other's discoveries.
It's pretty inspiring when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that collaborative spirit, it's not just in science. Think about open source software development.
Where people are sharing code, working together online to create things that anyone can use. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we share knowledge freely. And it's not just happening in those formal settings either. We see this kind of knowledge sharing every day in more casual ways.
Oh, totally. Just think about conversations with friends, online forums, even just watching and learning from people around us. We're constantly picking up bits and pieces of knowledge from each other.
It's like this invisible web connecting us all, weaving together our experiences, our insights.
It makes you realize we're all kind of learning and teaching all the time, even without realizing it.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really empowering. Once we see ourselves as part of this web, we can start being more intentional about our role in it.
Instead of just like passively absorbing information,
Hmm.
we can actively contribute, right?
Exactly. We can ask ourselves, what knowledge do I have that others might find useful? What can I learn from the people around me? How can I help move this whole thing forward?
It's a cool shift in perspective from being just a consumer of knowledge to being a creator, a contributor.
And that's what this whole deep dive has been about. It's not just about understanding knowledge. It's about inspiring you to engage with it, question it, share it, use it to make a difference.
To be curious, open-minded, and to never stop learning.
Exactly. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought, listener. Remember that knowledge isn't a finish line. It's a journey. And it's a journey filled with wonder, with discovery, with growth. Embrace the joy of lifelong learning. Be open to new perspectives and never stop asking questions.
It's been a fantastic journey exploring the world of knowledge with you. Thanks for being our guide.
The pleasure was all mine. And to you, listener, thanks for joining us on this adventure. We hope you feel inspired to continue your own exploration of knowledge and all its amazing possibilities.